All right. All right. We get to spend an evening here with Sri Ramakrishna, and he was just recently with the Brahmo devotees at Keshav's house and had his meeting with Keshav, and it was really sweet actually seeing that relationship and just seeing how two greats. I think the thing that really stuck in my mind from last week was the fact that these two great souls, great friends and great souls, meet together, and neither one of them inquired after each other's health, or family or anything like that, because they were so fully aware of not being the body, and they knew that each other both had that knowledge, and so it wasn't necessary. It didn't even occur to them to ask about how their body was doing. How's your health? Because just not sharing that delusion that we have. For you and I, that seems so important to, oh, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How's your mom? How's your little kid? How are your daughters? We do all of that because we're so deeply enmeshed with an identity with those things, that those we like to talk about them. We feel it's important for people to ask about them and to inquire. But for the free souls, the souls that they don't bother with that. They know that all is fine in the body, all is fine in the mind, all is fine as long as the self is in a state of awareness, that all of that can be in any condition or circumstance, and it would be the right one, because they can see the love behind all action, all happenings. Let's say they can see the divine, that everything is an emanation of that divine principle, God within us, that love, existence, and wisdom that we always talk about and keep coming back to. All right, so we're going to get a good song tonight. My goodness, we're right in the middle of the chapter. Let me see if I can find out what chapter we're in here. Chapter 15, the last visit to Keshav. All right, and let me see now if I can find my way back. All right, and so we're on the paragraph that starts on his way to Dakshineshwar from Keshav's cottage. All right. So on his way to Dakshineshwar from Keshav's cottage, Sri Ramakrishna stopped at Jaigopal Sen's house. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening. In the drawing room, Jaigopal's relatives and neighbors had gathered. Vaikuntha, Jaigopal's brother, said to the master, "Sir, we are worldly people. Please give us some advice." And the master, just very straightforwardly, "Do your duty to the world after knowing God. With one hand, hold to the lotus feet of the Lord, and with the other, do your work." Right? So it's very straightforward. We want to make, well, actually the ego loves to make things complicated, because that creates a necessity for itself. And it delights in finding the answer and providing the instruction and providing you hope and confidence. But it's all mirrors. It's all, smoke and mirrors when it comes from that egoistic perspective. And so really it's just a very simple thing. Remember God. Remember pure love. Keep the ideal of pure love in your mind at all times, and do everything for its sake and through its inspiration. That's the whole of it. That is all that is required. And actually in the Bible, the Old Testament, I think it's I don't remember where it is. I think it's one of the Psalms, although I've misquoted it several times. But anyway, in there, God says, "What does the Lord require of man but that he enjoy his work and walk humbly with his God?" That's all that's required. And when you break that down, well, how does one enjoy one's work? Well, one can only enjoy one's work when it's done without attachment and without a desire for results, when it's done as karma yoga, as an offering of love in the moment. And so that's all that's required. That's all that's necessary in spiritual life. We don't have to know anything else. We don't have to do anything else. We don't have to develop, achieve, attain, acquire, nothing. Everything is necessary in you right now at this very moment for your freedom, for your knowledge of the divine. All that is required is the memory, the remembrance of your divine nature, of the intimacy that you share with pure and unconditioned love, and to walk in that light and to walk in that inspiration in every moment, to be with the divine and to do your work, whatever is in front of you. You know, just like Sri Nisargadatta says in the Advaita class, you know, that you do what is necessary, do what presents itself to you in the moment, and do it with devotion, do it with love for love. And we go forward. So here, Master's telling them the same thing: do your duty in the world after knowing God, after becoming familiar and established in the presence of this divine love. So with one hand hold to the lotus feet of the Lord, and with the other one do your work. So just do everything with the remembrance of God. That is how our practice becomes our life, or our life becomes our practice, right? That religion is not separate from life. There's actually no, as we've said, there's no need for the word religion. Say the word life and it is the same thing. And all of us are being trained by the guru, whether we're aware of it or not. We're all learning from the divine guru inside, because it's that inner guru that makes us hurt when we act against our nature, when we act in selfishness, or we act in anger or jealousy or any of those other motives that the ego comes up with using the mind and body. We suffer. Well, that's the inner guru smacking your knuckles with the proverbial ruler. You know, the mean Catholic nun who slaps your hand when you're, you know, misbehave in school. And the world has that built in. We have it built into our nature. That's, you know, that's how Thakur can say all of us are going to find our freedom. And so live with that awareness. When there's suffering in your life, don't despair. That's the action of the beloved, showing you that you're violating your own nature. Don't go that way. There's more suffering there for you. Stay, turn around, come back here to the love, come back here to the wisdom. You know, abandon these things that are based on temporary things. Don't hold on to things that are destined to go away. You set yourself up for suffering, you know. So learn to detach and enjoy the attachment. No problem with that. You know, that's one wrong idea we often get in Vedanta, especially, that the ideal is detachment. No. The ideal is not detachment. The ideal is for your attachment to be matched by your power of detachment, so that you're not controlled by your attachments, so that you can love freely, and then when it's time, you can withdraw and go on.
Maharaj, would you please repeat this concept of detachment and with, no, I want you to say it.
Detachment and attachment. Well, that the ideal is not detachment. The reason that the scriptures are always talking about detachment is because we're awesome at attachment. We love to attach to things. We do that very easily. But detaching from things is very difficult for us. And so that's the thing we have to work on and focus on. And that's why the scriptures talk about it a lot, not because it's the most important one, but because we have to be as strong in our detachment as we are in our attachment, right? Because there is no other way to express love than to attach. You know, you have to sit down next to somebody and attach to them, to identify with them, to feel their pain, to feel their condition, to feel their space where they are, and to search out an understanding so that you can stand with them and sit with them in that space that they're experiencing. And there together you can walk forward. You know, so as Vedantins, we're great listeners. You know, should be. You know, we should be great listeners because we sit to listen, because it's an act of love to listen. And we don't listen in order to have a response. We listen in order to understand where a person is standing when they look at their world. so that we can feel what they feel and understand what they think and understand their positions. But most of all, we can understand and appreciate their view of their beloved. Because for the Vedantin, we have that unique capability of being able to worship everybody's divine ideal, regardless of the circumstance, regardless of the religion, or regardless of the creed or the dogma around it. We have, because of this teaching of Sri Ramakrishna, that all religions are true, all religions are one, that all the paths lead to God. And so instead of looking for what's wrong or different in each other's religions, we look to see where they are and how they're looking at their beloved or their divine or their ideal, so that we can appreciate it with them. And if there's something that can be learned, that's when it will happen. When that connection of respect, when you learn to respect the other person's view by investigating it, by looking at it, by trusting them to be able to create a positive thing within themselves, we trust that and we go and learn to see from that beautiful space. And then if there's something to be taught or something to be learned, it will happen naturally through a sharing, through a trust and a respect that is established by listening, by being open-hearted, and by caring. And so I don't know where all that came from, but here from this verse, that we live our life in the world with all of this in mind, that you are always, first of all, a lover of all beings, all things, living or non-living. Why limit it? We had pet rocks back in the 80s. We can bring those back if we want to. So just love. You're always first and foremost a lover. And remember that. Don't let any other title come over you. Go to work. You're not going to work to become an accountant, right? You're going to work to love first. You're the one that goes around and checks up on your coworkers, remembers birthdays, takes care of, remembering who was sick and whose family member wasn't doing well or who just lost a loved one. That's your primary job in this world always. And then you're an accountant. Second to that, then you're a husband, then you're a wife, then you're a man, then you're a woman. Then you can put any of those labels on that you want. That's why he says, first, learn to recognize God, do your duty in the world after knowing God. All right. And the sign of knowing God is being a lover, because you're because you're in love. You're in love, and you see that sweet beloved reflection in everything and everyone. And so you learn to work in the world with one hand clinging to your beloved and the other hand tapping on your computer. So he follows this question up with the next one. Vaikuntha says, well, is the world unreal? Right. And this is a very good question, because it's part of the Advaitic path to understand that the world is an illusion, that it's unreal. And quite often, if someone's been practicing bhakti or practicing the path of devotion, then they hear this idea that things are unreal, and they're like, oh, well, what am I in love with then? Who am I serving if that's the case? All right. And so he's heard this, and now he wants to know, well, you're telling me to know God, to love God, and then to do my work in the world as my duty. Excuse me. But I thought the world was unreal. So once the master says, well, yes, it is unreal as long as one has not realized God, right? Because if without knowing the divine, you do not know the substrate or the reality behind what you're observing in this world. You don't understand that this world is a reflection of your divine beloved. And until you realize that this world is the reflection of God, it's unreal. What is unreal? What you think the world is. That's what's unreal. The world is real. Like when you go to the movie theater, the movie's not real. That's the story. That's the still frame snapping one after the other with a soundtrack. That's not real. But behind there is something there, right? There's light and there's the white screen. That's what's real at the movie. And so what we're trying to do in this world is to live this world seeing the light of love reflecting on the white screen of mind. and to understand its nature. It's a love story. It's the unfolding of an infinite and unconditioned love. And that every single one of us is a line in that novel, a description of one way of loving in all of its different ways and forms. Even our vices are motivated by love. It's a misunderstood love, a misguided love, but all of our motives are always for love. We're always doing what we desire, always doing what we think we want, or doing what we think we need. So all of our lives, regardless of their condition, is a story of love. And our task is to come to know that, and then to sort out what it is we really love. So that when we think we want an object, we sit and discern and look at that object until we find the name of God in it that makes it attractive to us. That's what discernment or discrimination is. It's studying your desires until you can see what it is you really want. Because in the end, you'll realize what you really want is the beloved, your own nature, your own infinity, your own immortality, your own unconditioned love, your own infinite wisdom that you have projected on the world around you, but haven't known it yet. So yes, what you think the world is unreal. Families and people and objects and story after story, that's the unreal thing. That's your projection. How do we know that? Because we can all sit in the same room and have a different experience of it, right? If we could actually see it as it is, we would all experience it as it is. But we can't experience it as it is because all of us walk into the room with a story. And so that room plays its role in our story. And our goal in life is to silence the story and see the pure love that is actually present in everything and everyone in the room. And to know that all of it really is just a manifestation of that which we love the most, which is love itself. All right. So yes, this world is unreal as long as one has not realized God. Through ignorance, man forgets and speaks always of I and mine. Right? That's a staggering realization when you realize in our ignorance how selfish we are. Right? We measure everything from ourselves. Everything. You know, you either like it or don't like it. When you look at the stars, you measure their distance from you. It never occurs to you to measure the stars from the distance from your friend, you know, or from your daughter or from your wife or whatever. You know, every measurement that we make, we are the center of our world. This is my family. This is my job. This is my car, my house. And welcome, come on in, eat my food. Everything is me and mine, everything everywhere. And so through ignorance, so Thakur is telling us it's ignorant to think that way. Why? Because this body itself is a projection of the divine. It has nothing to do with you. You've only attached yourself to its story. And the same thing with this mind. You've attached yourself to its story and you've identified with it. And it's a stunning thing, but that's, you know, there's a place actually in the scriptures, I'm going to have to go look for it now that Mother's brought it to mind, where God is called identity. One of the names of God is called identity. And so whenever God draws near to anything, he identifies with it. A pure empathy happens, a pure embracing of that as part of itself, right? But through that identity with it, it gets confused. It doesn't see the barrier because itself, the soul, has no boundaries. The spirit has no boundaries. And so it draws close and it activates the mind and it owns the mind. It thinks itself to be the mind. It thinks itself to be that body. And it does that over and over and over again with every body in the dream. Right? And it goes on. So through ignorance, we forget God. We forget our nature. We forget what we really are. And we become small. We become particular. And we speak always of I and mine. He sinks down and down, entangled in Maya, deluded by lust and greed. Maya robs him of his knowledge to such an extent that he cannot find a way of escape, though such a way exists. Right? Our story carries on another story, carries on another story, right? It spins more and more stories. Relationship after relationship, idea after idea, state of mind after state of mind, and we can no longer find ourselves to the shrine room of the heart. we can't find the way anymore because we're so lost in layers and layers and layers of motives, desires, hopes, dreams, disappointments, longings, and wonderings. And so Maya robs us of this knowledge to such an extent that we can't find our way out. And that's where depression sets in, hopelessness sets in, frustration sets in, bitterness ultimately comes and robs us of our very ability to see the beauty of our existence, robs us of our ability to see the beauty of our own wisdom, and robs us of the ability to find contentment in simply being that immortal, ever-present, ever-loving self. But he promises in the end, he says, even though Maya has robbed you to the extent that you can't find a way of escape, where you think, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to change. I'm never going to be able to get out of this situation. He says, as his last sentence, such a way does exist. There is a way out. Do not give up. Do not give up. Do not give up. Keep going, because when you find it, when you touch it, it will have been worth every effort, regardless of how toilsome that path might have been. And now Ramakrishna says, listen to a song, and I just wish that he was here to sing this for us. He sings, when such a delusion veils the world through Mahamaya's spell, that Brahma is bereft of sense and Vishnu loses consciousness, what hope is left for men? Then he starts speaking again. He says, you all know from your experience how impermanent the world is, right? You don't have to be told this world's impermanent, right? You don't have to be told that, but you have to accept it. And that's such a strange thing, you know, that when we lose a loved one, what's our first thought? Oh, God, how could you do this to me? And God's looking at you all confused, like, what are you talking about? Oh, what did I do to you? I didn't do anything to you. I brought that soul home. I set that soul free. Why are you lamenting? What do you have to do with that? You know, you also are an ever free soul, and you also are coming home. You know, you also will break the bounds of your delusion. What do you mean? What did I do to you? I'm sorry. Well, of course he does get it because he's the one asking at the same time. But he says, you all know from your experience how impermanent the world is. Look at it this way. How many people have come into the world again and passed away? People are born and they die. Simple fact of life. No reason to be happy, no reason to be sad. Everything is born and everything dies. All the seasons, you know, go through the cycle over and over and over and over again. Every day, the sun rises, the sun sets. Everything in this universe rises and falls, comes into being, plays its part, goes back to the emptiness. This moment the world is, and the next it is not. It is impermanent. Those you think to be your very own will not exist for you when you close your eyes in death. Again, you see people who have no immediate relatives, and yet for the sake of a grandson, they will not go to Benares to lead a holy life. Oh, what will become of my Haru then? You know, these stories that keep us entangled in the world. Oh, this world can't do without me, right? That's one of the biggest mistakes you can make in the office, is to assume that you cannot be replaced, right? And yet we all feel that way. What would my family do without me? What would my friends do without me? How disappointed would my parents be without me? Right? And so we make ourselves a necessity, and we attach to everything around us because we can't stand the idea of being impermanent, because we've forgotten that we are not impermanent, right? And that self, that divine soul, is terrified of its impermanence that it has taken on through its ignorant decision to identify itself as body and as mind with the material world. Just like you, when you go to sleep at night and you fall into a dream and you believe yourself to be a rubber duck floating off the island of Timbuktu, you know, and you accept that dream as real, and you accept that rubber duck body as your body, And you carry on your story of delusion and attachment even through the middle of your dream, right? And then you wake up from that one, and here you are, back in this mortal frame, carrying on this story, living in this strange world, and going on. And Mother's just saying, you're going to wake up from this one too. Don't worry. That you, which has become all these things, will still be the you, always. You never stop. You always exist. And that nature is always love and wisdom. And he's just saying, no, nothing in this world can be relied on. So don't. What can be relied on is what you are, your nature. Go inside and find that nature. Find that immortality. Find that unchanging self, which is witnessing your life, which is watching all of your life. He sings again. The narrow channel first is made, and there the trap is set. But open though the passage lies, the fish, once safely through the gate, do not come out again. Yet even though a way leads forth, encased within its own cocoon, the worm remains to die. So even knowing the way out, right? Even knowing the way out, we still are continually burrowing deeper into the mud. Always making little exceptions, always turning our vices into reward, thinking they're what we really want, Oh, I haven't had a piece of cake in 4 days. Let me go out today and go to the pie shop and have a big piece of coconut cream pie to celebrate my great success. Right? So let me tantalize my weakness in celebration of my weakness. It makes no sense. And yet this is how we get deluded, by living in the senses and by chasing after all of the desires that the mind and the body can conjure up. This kind of world is illusory and impermanent. You see, and from that perspective, be grateful. Be grateful. Finally, my diet is over. 60 years of dieting and not losing or keeping off a single pound. Finally, the frame begins to wither, and this game comes to an end. So yes, this kind of world is illusory and impermanent, and it does die and it does go away. And you should not be sad in that. You should find a great deal of satisfaction in that, a great deal of bliss in that you are not stuck forever, that freedom is promised and guaranteed from the very inception of God breathing this life into you and placing his divine principle of love and wisdom in your heart and hiding it there in a beautiful shrine for you to find when you've exhausted yourself from looking everywhere else for it. A neighbor says, "Why, sir, should one hold to God with one hand and to the world with the other? Why should we do that? Why should one even stretch out one hand to hold to the world if it is impermanent?" The master, "The world is not impermanent if one lives there after knowing God. After you know the nature of the world, you know what is real. And you know that this changing world is simply a reflection of this divine principle, that which is real. And that which is real in you is what makes this life worth living. And what is it that is real in you? Love. Love is what is real within you. And if you want to find out how to live according to your nature. Love, be wise, and be present. With just those 3 things, the emptiest life will become full. The most depressing day will take a new glimmer of light and hope. It's selfishness that kills us. It's serving body and mind and forgetting our nature of love and wisdom that kills us, that makes our life boring, that makes everything seem so mundane, when we're filled from top to bottom, left to right, all around us with a mystery that's infinitely deep and infinitely wonderful. But materialism and attachment to the things that are fading away prevents us from being able to appreciate that mystery, from being able to see it for the first time again. It is this wrong thinking that turns our world gray. The world is not impermanent if one lives there after knowing God. Listen to another song. O mind, you do not know how to farm. Fallow lies the field of your life. If you had only worked it well, how rich a harvest you might reap. Hedge it about with Kali's name, if you would keep your harvest safe. This is the stoutest hedge of all, for death himself cannot come near it. Did you listen to the song? Hedge it about with Kali's name if you want to keep your harvest safe. Surrender yourself to God, and you will achieve everything. There it is, one sentence. Surrender yourself to God, and you will achieve everything. What does that mean? Surrender yourself to the impulse of pure love. Surrender yourself to the impulse of an unconditioned love. So stop conditioning your love and giving it only to people you either find worthy or related to you, right? Start giving out your love freely, because you have an infinite well of this love to draw from. Use it. Live for it. Surrender yourself to that nature, right? Surrender yourself to God, to love, to wisdom, to being, and you will achieve everything. This is the stoutest hedge of all, for death himself cannot come near it. It is immortal. What is it that we remember about Jesus? What is it we remember about Buddha, about Rama, about Krishna? It's love. Love is what we remember. Love is immortal. Love does not disappear or wane. Yes, it is the strong hedge indeed. If you but realize God, you won't see this world as unsubstantial. God is the meaning of life. Pure love, pure wisdom, pure being is the point of everything. It's when you start believing that things are important for results, that are important for things that will happen or be attained or grabbed in the future, when everything becomes a process of desire, that's when the world becomes hideously tyrannical, right? But when you come back to the moment, this unchanging isness, and you open your eyes and you look again at everything around you for the first time, you throw open all of the shutters of the windows of yourself simultaneously, paying attention to no particular, but opening and accepting all of it, and offering it back by doing what is before you as an offering to it. This is a strong hedge indeed. You won't see the world as unsubstantial when you realize God. He who has realized God knows that God himself has become the world, has become all of its living beings. All right, so there's God. You want to see God? Look. Everything you're looking at, everything you're hearing, everything you're tasting, everything that you're experiencing is a reflection of that one divine principle, God. Look at it all, but be careful to put the ego away so that you can see it all as it is and not as your story turns it into. He who has realized God knows that God himself has become the world and all living beings. When you feed your child, you should feel that you are feeding God. You should look on your father and mother as veritable manifestations of God and the Divine Mother, and serve them as such. If a man enters the world after realizing God, he does not generally keep up physical relations with his wife. Both of them are devotees. They love to talk of God and pass their time in spiritual conversations. They serve other devotees of God, for they know that God alone has become all living beings, and knowing this, they devote their lives to the service of others. Neighbor: but sir, such a husband and wife are not to be found anywhere. Master: yes, they can be found, though they may be very rare. Worldly people cannot recognize them, right? This person who's asking this question is sitting right there in front of Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, a married couple that meets the criteria exactly, and saying to his very face, "Sir, such a husband and wife are not to be found anywhere." See, this is the Maya that prevents you from seeing. This assumption that because you are not this way, then nobody is this way. There was a great minister of my church that I went to when I was in high school, actually. His name was Neil Gallagher. That was his name. Anyway, he one time said in a sermon something that made a big impression on me. He said, if a hypocrite is standing between you and God, that just makes them that much closer to God than you are. So all those hypocrites, at the temple or at your church or at your sangha or at your temple or whatever it is you may be going to, if they're the reason that you don't believe or that you don't trust or that you give up or that you walk away from your effort, it's a silly thing to do, from that perspective. Neil Gallagher's little saying there. Of course, it is true that hypocrisy is a hideous thing, certainly debilitating. So don't be one, right? And if you're not one, you won't see others being one. So root out your own faults and do not see the faults of others. And in everything that you do it for and to the beloved. Literally, when you eat an ice cream, don't relish the flavor for yourself. Take that flavor and see yourself offering it to the Divine Mother as you taste it. As you taste that flavor, give it directly to the Mother. Don't sit there and analyze it yourself. Don't appreciate it yourself. Don't take it on for your own enjoyment. Imagine Mother enjoying that taste through you, because that's in fact what really is happening, right? It is the dreamer that enjoys the dream, not the dreamed. The one who talks about the dream when it's over is the one who dreamed it, not the one who played it, not the one who was in it, right? And so when your life is finished, it's not going to be the character you think you are right now that is going to talk about this experience. It's going to be the Mother. It's going to be the divine. So everything that you do here is done to the dreamer. Remember that. So when you feed your child, you're feeding the dreamer, the beloved, the divine. When you're sitting there eating, you're feeding the divine. When you're fixing your hair in the morning, you're dressing Mother's hair, dressing Thakur's hair. It goes on infinitely. It becomes silly at some times. It becomes desperately serious at others. But it's always a play. See it that way. Don't get trapped. Don't begin to think that the dream is real. You will wake up from this. And so when you come to realize this, what starts to happen? You talk only of this divinity. You talk only of this sweetness of love, this sweetness of wisdom. You're always talking of what you're seeing in every little event, what you're learning from watching the mouse run across the room or the ant climb up the stem of the plant. You're actively learning. The world is a constant exchange between you and your beloved. You begin to see that life is a conversation between you and the dreamer, right? And so you begin to talk directly to the dreamer through all of the dreamed, through every person you see, through every dog you pet, through every cat that you feed your little tuna fish to. All of these things point at the beloved, point at the dream. And when we begin to realize it, that's all we can talk about. That's how we spend our time in spiritual conversation, which isn't a small little box of conversations that we think it is right now. It's an infinite world of conversations covering every aspect of being, every aspect of experience. It's a beautiful conversation that's rooted in love and leads us to wisdom. For they know that God alone has become all living beings, and knowing this, they devote their lives to the service of others. Neighbor, but sir, such a husband and wife are not to be found. Yes, they can be found, though they may be very rare. Worldly people cannot recognize them. Why? Because we project our mind on everybody. right? We project our mind on everybody. We can't see their mind. We can't know their mind. So we project ours on them. And that does not allow us to recognize holy people. We can't see God. Look at the number of people that met Jesus, that met Buddha, met Ramakrishna. You know, how many people met Ramakrishna and called him that insane Brahmin over at the church? How many people saw Jesus and thought he should die? You know, how many people saw the Buddha and paid no attention? You know, what a good for nothing wandering vagrant. So be careful of the purity of your mind. Be careful of what you identify with, because these are the reasons we can't see God. These are the reasons we begin to think that God is a matter of belief and not a matter of experience. In order to lead such a life, both the husband and the wife must be spiritual. It is possible to lead such a life if both of them have tasted the bliss of God. That's the whole point. In your spiritual practice, at some point, someday, if it hasn't already happened, you're going to touch something that makes you startle and think, oh, whoa, what was that? And you'll spend the rest of your days waiting for that experience again, because it had made such an impression on you. It touched you in such a beautiful and sweet way that you can't do without it. That's that mortal wound that the medieval Christians like to talk about. You know, when St. John of the Cross talks about the beloved giving him that immortal wound, you know, on his neck. It's that idea that God touches you with divine love and you are marked forever. You can't forget. You're crazy. You're like, wow, 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 right? And so he says, we can't live the real life. We can't live in this world as it's real until we have tasted that bliss of God. So purify your mind, be unselfish, constantly be eliminating the ideas of me and mine, the boundaries of ego, the limitations of judgment. Constantly be shedding that. Every time you see a fault in somebody, make it a tool of empathy by remembering that you have done that same thing. Remember when you did it and remember how it made you feel, and build an empathy for that person instead of a hatred or a judgment for that person. Let all of your experiences of your vices create a soft and open mind that can hear, that can listen, that can understand. And use your practice to know the way out so that you can share it in a close love and respectful togetherness with the person who needs it. God's special grace is necessary to create such a couple. Otherwise, there will always be misunderstanding between them. In that case, one has to leave the other. Life becomes very miserable if a husband and wife do not agree. The wife will say to her husband day and night, "Why did my father marry me to such a person? I can't get enough to eat, even to feed my children. I haven't clothes enough to cover my body and to give my children. I haven't received a single piece of jewelry from you. How happy you have made me. Ah, you keep your eyes closed and mutter the name of God. Now, do give up all these crazy ideas," right? These conversations happen between lovers all the time because we don't know better. We see ourselves as small and limited, deeply attached to our bodies and our minds, and we only like things that give pleasure and give service to our body and mind. And with some, idea of generosity, occasionally we'll flip a nice thing towards someone and we'll feel good about that for 2 or 3 years before we do it again. Be free from your limitations and your restrictions. Understand your own infinity and the fact that your love has no bottom, that you can draw from that well as much as you like and give it away as freely as you can. The devotee. There are such obstacles, certainly. Besides, the children may be disobedient. There are no end of difficulties. So here's a real householder knowing, they know You're absolutely right, man. My children are selfish, they're disobedient. There's all kinds of obstacles. There is no end of difficulties. Now, sir, what is the way? Master, what is the way? Master, it is extremely difficult to practice spiritual discipline and at the same time lead a householder's life. There are many handicaps: disease, grief, poverty, misunderstanding with one's wife, and disobedient, stupid, and stubborn children. I don't have to give you a list of them, but still there is a way out. One should pray to God, going now and then into solitude, and make an effort to realize him. Neighbor, must one leave home then? Master, no, not altogether. Whenever you have leisure, whenever you get some free time, instead of sitting down and watching a YouTube video. Whenever you have leisure, go into solitude for a day or two. Take some time for yourself. At that time, don't have any relations. Don't have any relations with the outside world. Don't hold any conversation with worldly people on worldly affairs. You must live either in solitude or in the company of holy men. Right? This is the way. So every now and then, as you can manage to make time for yourself, get away from your story. Get away from your cell phone, get away from the internet, get away from your wife, get away from your lovers, your friends, your drinking buddies, whatever it is. Get away from all of them and go by yourself somewhere in nature where the right angles of ego are not in your sight, and be with God. Look at everything and learn. Open your heart to the peace you find there, and absorb it and understand this reflection of your beloved. Learn to see it and learn to share in it and learn to walk in a great deal of joy in it. And then come back to your wife and come back to your husband. And now you have something to share. Now you have something to give where you didn't know before. Right? Must one leave home then? No, not altogether. When you have leisure, go into solitude for a day or two. At that time, don't have any relations with the outside world. Don't hold any conversation with worldly people on worldly affairs. You must live either in solitude or in the company of holy men. Just a moment here. Okay. Right. Neighbor, how can one recognize a holy man? All right, here's a good piece of information. He who has surrendered his body, mind, and innermost self to God is surely a holy person. He who has renounced lust and greed is surely a holy person. He is a holy man who does not regard woman with the eyes of a worldly person. He never forgets to look upon woman as his mother and to offer her his worship if he happens to be near her. The holy man constantly thinks of God and does not indulge in any talk except about spiritual things. Furthermore, he serves all beings, knowing that God resides in everybody's heart. These, in general, are the signs of a holy person. Right? So somebody who's not lusting, somebody who's not greedy, who's trying to work an angle on everything, someone who serves others, someone who's very respectful of people that they might be attracted to, right? Doesn't treat them as a body, doesn't treat them as an object of desire, but treats them as the divine presence and respects them. He talks about spiritual things all the time, knows and loves everyone, knowing that God resides in everyone that he sees. These are the signs of a holy person. The neighbor, must one always live in solitude? Master, haven't you seen the trees on the footpath along the street? They are fenced around as long as they are very young. Otherwise, cattle destroy them. But there is no longer any need of fences when their trunks grow thick and strong. Then they won't break even if an elephant is tied to them. Just so, there will be no need for you to worry and fear if you make your mind as strong as a thick-trunked tree. First of all, try to acquire discernment, discrimination. Break the jackfruit open only after you have rubbed your hands with oil. Then its sticky milk won't smear. What is discrimination? What is discernment, Master? Discrimination is the reasoning by which one knows that God alone is real and everything else is unreal. Real means eternal, and unreal means impermanent. So anything that is impermanent is not real. So find that thing which is not changing, right? Remember that story I told when I first read this verse? Gosh, I was a brahmachari a long time ago, 25 years ago, this happened, where I read this verse and I thought, okay, so that which is unchanging alone is real, right? And I went to the shrine and I sat there, I don't know, for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, just going, just whatever I could think of, just trying to think of that thing that doesn't change, that thing that isn't temporary. And I was like, good gosh, I honestly couldn't come up with anything. And so that day when I went down to lunch with Swami Prabodhananda at the table, I sat there, I said, Maharaj, I spent the whole morning up there in that shrine room, because Thakur says that God alone is real, that anything that changes, anything that's temporary is not real, that unchanging thing alone is real. And I said, I can't think of anything that doesn't change. And I remember the way Swami looked at me, just that wonderful impish twinkle in his eye, when he looked at me and just said, did you consider that which was looking? And boy, bing, I was like, oh my God, that is beautiful. So perfectly hidden from me, right under where I was sitting, that God was so close, sitting there looking through my eyes, completely unrecognized by me. Yes. Discrimination is the reasoning by which one knows that God alone is real. All else is unreal. Real means eternal. Unreal means impermanent. He who has acquired discrimination knows that God is the only substance and everything else is non-existent. With the awakening of this spirit of discernment, a man wants to know God. On the contrary, if a man loves the unreal, such things as creature comforts, name, fame, and wealth, then he doesn't want to know God, who is of the very nature of reality. Through discrimination between the real and the unreal, one seeks to know God. Listen to a song. Come, let us go for a walk, O mind, to Kali, the wish-fulfilling tree, and there beneath it gather the 4 fruits of life. Of your 2 wives, dispassion and worldliness, bring along dispassion only on your way to the tree, and ask her son discrimination about the truth. By turning the mind within oneself, one acquires discrimination, and through discrimination one thinks of truth. Then the mind feels the desire to go for a walk to Kali, the wish-fulfilling tree. Reaching that tree, that is to say, going near to God, you can, without any effort, gather 4 fruits, namely Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Yes, after realizing God, one can also get, if one desires, Dharma, Artha, and Kama, which are necessary for leading the worldly life. Right? And we'll stop there for tonight.